The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Invisible Wounds or Wightman. Please be aware that the content of Fireside Chats with Deborah may contain sensitive subjects such as suicide, grief, violence, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. By discussing these subjects, we will decrease stigma, bring awareness, and hope. If you need support, please reach out to trusted contacts, family, friends, call your doctor, or go to the closest emergency department. Call helplines such as Boots on the Ground at 1-833-677-BOOT. We hope this series helps build self-confidence in you. On today's show, Teal Parkinson, owner Ayrshire House, a spouse's perspective. This episode of Fireside Chats with Deborah is brought to you by the Ayrshire House in Elora, Ontario. Welcome to the Ayrshire House. Refined and exceptionally welcoming, the Ayrshire House offers first-class accommodations in the historic village of Elora, where the beauty of nature blends seamlessly with the sophisticated small-town charm. The Ayrshire House offers beautifully curated accommodations fronting on the main street of the charming village of Elora. Featuring sophisticated designs and modern amenities, our 9 elegantly furnished guest rooms and suites are housed in 3 properties situated all minutes from the elegant Elora Mill and Spa, and only steps from the historic downtown and its stylish restaurants, upscale boutiques, eclectic art galleries, craft brewery and distillery, and spectacular eco-adventures. Find out more at www.ayrshirehouse.com.
Thanks for joining us today, and I'm very happy to be able to introduce a woman from Elora, and her name is Teal Parkinson, and she has gifted Invisible Wounds this beautiful, actually it's a suite and you can't see it unfortunately, but take my word for it, it's beautiful. And it's the name of the place. Why don't you tell me the history of it, because I found it very interesting.
It's a really neat, lovely old building. So it's called the Ayrshire House. We named it that. It was actually my husband who came up with the name. We sort of were racking our brains about what to call the place, but his family is Scottish and are from right near Ayr in Scotland, Ayrshire, Scotland, and it's also where the founder of Elora came from. So yeah, back in the 1800s, we just kind of thought the connection was pretty neat. The house itself is just a really neat spot in Centre Wellington history. It was built in 1831 for Dr. William Robertson, who was sort of Elora's preeminent doctor of the time. And he lived here, ran his practice here. His daughter actually married Frederick Banting, so that's why we're in the Banting suite at the moment, but of insulin fame. So it's got a really neat place in kind of Canadian history too. And then just neat things. It was the first house here to have electricity in Centre Wellington. For a while there were nuns living here, then it became a school. It's been subsequent B&Bs for several decades before we became the latest stewards of the place. So.
And so when actually did you and your husband's name is Eric? Yeah, so when did you both take possession of this?
Just before COVID.
Wow,
So,
you still have it.
We stuck it out. Actually, it worked out okay for us. We did pretty extensive renovations, and cosmetic renovations, but we were able to do it, during COVID, and so it worked out well. By the time things calmed down, we were able to open our doors and kind of grow. It's funny though, it was intended to be our retirement someday plan, and it just sort of happened a little sooner than we expected.
Well, we might come back to that a little bit, but let's acknowledge the fact that we're here today, and one of the things that we've been talking about is first responders. That's kind of the theme. And your husband actually is a first responder.
He is, yeah.
And he's a firefighter.
He is.
Yeah. And how long has he been on the job?
18 years.
18.
Yeah, so he has just become a captain recently. I've got my husband's a firefighter, and we've got military in the family and police officers in the family, so Lots of first responder connections. So this felt sort of kismet when you reached out, and we're really happy to be involved.
No, thank you. Thank you. Once again, we're very appreciative. So do you want to share a little bit maybe about what it's like? You're a wife and you've been married how long?
14 years.
14 years. Mm-hmm. And you have a couple of children?
We do. We've got 2 little ones, yeah, a boy and a girl.
So you met Eric, and well, let's describe the early years. What was that like?
Well, actually, of all places to have met, we met at Oktoberfest. So it kind of was a funny start because it was, me and one of my best girlfriends, and we, prior to Eric and I meeting, the week before we had run into an old friend from high school who had become a firefighter. And then, so they were meeting up that night, and I kind of went along for the ride and sort of saw Eric, and I don't know, there was a space, beside him at the table to play poker, and we just kind of hit it off. And I had plans later that night, and I never went to them. He
became your plan.
He became my plan, yeah. You got it. Yeah, and it was, of course, it's fun and exciting. You're young, you're dating a firefighter, and, there's
lots of sparks.
Yeah, you got it. Yes, you got it. All the kinds, yeah. So yeah, I don't know, it was lovely. At the same time, I was doing graduate school work, so I actually had to leave to go out east for a little while, and we just spoke on the phone almost every day, and I came home, and by then we kind of knew each other really well, because that's kind of all we did. We chatted, over the phone every day, so yeah.
So when you were, we're segueing all over the place, but bear with me. So when you were going to school, what you enrolled in?
Oh, I was an archaeologist before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I call it my other life. Yeah, I was a historical archaeologist, so I spent some time out in Newfoundland and in Ireland and studied early Irish settlement in Canada. So from there, I was teaching at Laurier for a number of years before this. And yeah, it was kind of funny. Like I said, this was our retirement plan, but it just so happened that year before COVID, I decided to step back from teaching. The kids my eldest was starting school, our eldest. And, with Eric's job, there's days he's not home for, 24 hours at a time. They're on a 24-hour shift. And if I was teaching a night class or late afternoon, we were sort of I didn't want to pass the kids in the wind, and that's the trajectory I was on. Yeah, and so at that time we were sort of moving from, such as they are, the suburbs of Elora, but looking to come downtown, and we found our house, which is where the Ayrshire house started, with 2 suites in our home, and then it grew from there.
Wonderful. So you've been in the relationship. It started off sounds really wonderful, but there are some realities that come with being with the first responder. What are you comfortable sharing about some of the challenges that you've had with your relationships that are strictly due to the profession that he's chosen?
As far as our marriage goes, there was absolutely a learning curve at the beginning, especially for me. Also, for Eric, he got on the department really young. He was 23 when he started. I think at that stage of things, first responders are able to let a lot more roll off their back, than they are maybe a little bit later, or as things accumulate over time. But even still at that stage, he'd come home, and perhaps there was a particular incident or something that happened. And early on, I didn't necessarily understand what was going on. He'd come home in a state that wasn't his usual self. And we had to learn together, how to cope with those mornings when he would come back off shift. And whether that was him saying something as simple as, something awful happened, or I had a really bad shift. I just need some time, so that I would understand why he might come home upset, easily angered, those kinds of things. He in turn didn't want to burden me, with some of the really bad things. So there was a big learning curve to that. You know, how could I help him? How could I be there, listen, hold space for him? At the same time, how could he find a way to unburden a little bit without, you know, being worried about my emotional reaction to whatever it is that he was dealing with.
So can I just ask, how did you learn or develop a plan? It sounds like you had some good communication.
Do you know, there's an awful lot of trial and error. Eric was also really lucky to have a couple of really good captains, one in particular, who taught the guys young to not sit on stuff. So if there was a particularly bad call, you know, they didn't just get back in the truck and go, you know, is everybody okay? And everybody goes, oh yeah, we're fine, and then that's it. It was, okay, when we get back to the fire station, everybody go grab coffee, let's sit down and talk about this. There was no option to I'm sure there was an option to opt out, but you know, that was really reinforced in him. So I always felt lucky, and I know he did too, to have that particular captain. And he was able to kind of carry that home with me. The early years with figuring that out was tough. But yeah, we just kind of always tried to talk about it. And even if it was as simple as something bad happened, I'm gonna need a few hours. And I had to learn, I mean, I wanna help, but I had to learn to just respect that boundary and step back and give him a little bit of time, and then he'd, you know, come back around and talk about it when he wanted to, or maybe he didn't want to, but yeah. And then when we had kids, I feel like we're also lucky through the work of, you know, people like you. The stigma associated with all of this stuff is easing. So we've tried really consciously to raise the kids with some very non-specific, but some idea of the fact that dad has to deal with some really rough stuff. And you know, there's going to be days where he comes home and the kids kind of jokingly call him grumpy dad on those days, you know, but they mean it in a respectful way of sort of, it's their way of acknowledging, oh, something must have happened, you know, dad's going to be a little off today. And so, yeah, we try to keep that line of communication open with them too. It's tough because they're young and you don't want to say, you know, wow, there was a car accident and this awful thing happened. But I also feel like any family with a first responder and kids, the kids need to find some way of understanding the moods and the things that, you know, their parents are going through, and, you know, how that affects them and how that affects their emotional well-being and, you know, their interactions with their family. And so we try to talk a lot.
Good. I can let you know that I've got two people that just popped to my mind, and one is Nick Helmsley. He's a firefighter, and he's also a clinician. And I've had him at a couple of conferences, and he's written a book, and it's for families to assist with communications and raising kids and that type of thing, and it's after the call. And there's also Dr. Susan Hunt, and she's out in BC, and there's a hero lives in my house. And I don't know if you're familiar with any of those books, but it's excellent. In my opinion, both of them. Susan's she's just upgraded it, or what do you call it when you do it? Second edition. I don't know. Anyhow, you can buy it on Amazon. And but there's also a workbook that comes with it, so it's really geared to kids. And it could be geared to adults too. It's kind of like behavioral. It's like behavioral mod 101 or something like that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. There are supports out there, and just to let you know that sometimes you have to kind of look around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll put that on my website, I think.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I think that's one thing that a lot of first responders, they've got families, and I think more and more, they're realizing the impacts of, this kind of stuff when it comes home. And it's really important to Eric and I. It was one of our conversations when we were going to have our kids, was, how best do you, help them understand what's going on, you know, be conscious and cautious about what's translating over into your family life. And I don't know. I really don't know how he does it, because I can't imagine, I have a hard time imagining being in the situations that first responders and medical professionals find themselves in. And particularly once you get into a situation where you've got a more authoritative role and you're needing to make these life and death very quick, decisive decisions. He's a captain now, so he also, you know, is in a position where people need to listen to him, respect his authority, and listen quickly. How that translates over when you come back home, I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he...
Oh, he doesn't bring it home?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, it's entirely dependent, I think, on the kind of day that he's how much sleep he's had. There's, you know, days when he's at a particularly, you know, busy station, he doesn't sleep as much. But that's a big thing for him. He's been trying always to figure out the best way to flick the switch on the way home, to, you know, metaphorically take off the firefighter helmet and put on a dad hat and somehow let it go. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm always very impressed with how he does that. Yeah. I think it's a very conscious thing to have to do.
Sounds like you made a good choice there.
He is a good one, I will say. I'm fairly fond of the guy.
So is there anything as far as peer support? It sounds like your husband, wherever it is that he works, that they've got a good peer support group going on.
They do. They do.
Do they have a critical incident stress?
Yes.
They do too?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've got a great team that comes in. There is also a fair amount of peer-to-peer support in the department, which is really important. But I've seen that myself grow, you know, over the last, you know, 14 years we've been married longer together. From not very much at the beginning to, you know, more and more as time goes by and the guys get more comfortable and used to talking about stuff and recognizing how important it is to decompress and talk about some of this stuff, because otherwise it just... And even with all of that, I mean, Eric is like, he's a really great, you know, dad. He handles all of this stuff, his job really, really well. But even still, you see it accumulate. I mean, I think he's, as much as he loves the job and he's not going anywhere, but I can see it in him some days more now than back at the beginning. You know, he's looking forward to being more into the Ayrshire house, I think, you know, over time. Because it accumulates. I think people don't always realize that on the outside. You know, it's not always one incident that throws you over the edge. Of course, you know better than most, but it's, you know, it's the accumulated experiences over time, and yeah, all of that building up in there. And
well, I think you'll be interested actually, and maybe Eric with you, is watching and listening to Christina Harrington, who was one of the speakers on the show. And she talks about planning for retirement, and one of the things is when to start that, and it's like right when you start your job. And it's your physical health and your mental health, and it's not all about finances and things like that. So you know, she shares a lot of her experience and wisdom, and I think definitely, you know, I'm right up your alley if you want to have something to listen to and learn from.
The physical health stuff too, that's another worry I didn't anticipate at the beginning. I should clarify that. Of course, I always worried about, you know, something happening to him on the job, you know, in the middle of an incident. But, you know, of course, too, over the last 15 years or so, they've learned so much more about chemical exposure and, you know, all of the long-term effects of some of the stuff they come into contact with, and not just breathing smoke, but lithium battery fires, and, you know, like there's a lot of other, you know, concerns there. And that's tough for everybody, but it's tough on a family too, because, you know, you worry about that stuff. And the kids, you know, are getting older now, and they're, you know, dad's their hero. Yeah. But they're also getting old enough to understand, well, sometimes he's, you know, getting into some pretty hairy situations. Yeah. So.
And sometimes the social media stuff that's out, the news, and a lot of the media can really, I mean, they zero in on something, and it's you know, it's news for a couple of days, and but that could be somebody's that they know, and that type of stuff, and really impact. Yeah. So, I mean, open communication is definitely it. And also, I think that there have been some changes. It sounds like wherever your husband's working, that administratively there must be more sensitivity. I don't know, maybe by the chief or the human resources or somebody in providing some support and some monies. I think that's one of the things that has been difficult for municipalities to really see the need for first responders to receive the support that they need and the preventative measures. You talked about accumulative stress and the impact it has. Well, if they don't take care of their employees' health and welfare and support that, you know, there's financial costs, you know, when somebody's off sick and that type of stuff, as you're well aware. So I'm not sure that everybody's on board with that, but I think people are changing, and that's the positive thing.
Yeah, I do too.
So this is your retirement place. Well, it's pretty cozy, I tell you.
Thank you.
It's is it? Do you have like a high season here?
We do. Yeah, we do. Summer's in Elora, but really it kind of carries through right until about Christmas time, because we always joke Elora looks a little bit like a snow globe in the in the winter time. So yeah, the Elora Mill does a lot of weddings, so that kind of carries through as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been growing a little bit faster than we thought. We've opened two more rooms recently, so we're up to 9 suites altogether now, and it's been really fun. Yeah. It's been great. Gives, you know, Eric enjoys the project of it on his days off, and for me now, I mean, like I said, I worried at the beginning of being able to be there with my kids, and now it's kind of like, yes, check in around 3. I pick up the kids from school, you know, and I'm here and available, but I also get to be a mom, which just makes me happy. So, yeah.
That's good.
It's pretty lovely.
I'm wondering, do you get many first responders here?
We do.
You do?
We do. Yeah, we get a lot of the crew will come out for various things, whether they're attending a wedding or just, you know, looking for a getaway. It's nice to have a connection with, you know, with somebody, I think, on both sides. Right. Kids crack me up with it, because if they know it's somebody they know, you know, they'll always ask first, but they're already kind of I don't know, sort of the next obvious, you know, takeover for the Ayrshire house. Especially my younger guy, he'll often kind of walk up to them and, you know, introduce himself if they don't know him. But he'll say things like, you know, thanks so much for staying with us. It was fun having you here. I hope we get to see you again. And, you know, when we started this, he was just a young little tow-headed guy. So anyway, they're cute with it. They get a little more leeway when the first responders are here. Yeah.
So is there anything that you'd like to share? Anything that we haven't really touched on? You've been really open, and I really want to congratulate you in that and show my appreciation of that. And Eric, wherever you are, it's unfortunate you couldn't join us. I know that you wanted to, but something just came up. But I want to acknowledge and thank you for your services, of course. It is a honorable profession, but it also is a difficult one on occasion. And to all the first responders, thank you very much. Anything else that you want to share?
No, I don't think so. Just thank you for everything that you've done. I mean, like I said, towards the beginning of things with Eric and our relationship, a lot of this stuff was not, you know, it wasn't talked about, and it wasn't, you know, the resources weren't there as much for, you know, for first responders to kind of unload the burden that they do carry around. And so it's so important what you're doing, and I'm just
well, and look at you. I mean, we didn't meet until I made a phone call or sent an email, and here you are open and talking about things that can be difficult, but also providing hope to people and exemplifying the benefits of having open communication, acknowledging that it's not always easy, that there was some struggles along the way. You know, I don't know whether or not you use counseling, but, you know, we advocate for that if people, well, we actually advocate for the mental health checkup once a year at least, and kind of get a relationship going with a counselor, because sure as heck, sooner or later you're going to need one. Yeah. Maybe. That's kind of maybe the prejudice viewpoint on our point or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, once again, you're just lovely, and thank you very much. You're a great role model for the youngsters coming in too.
That's very kind. Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you called. I knew right away on the phone that we were gonna get along and have a good conversation. So thank you.
So, hi, my name is Dr. Yelena Chorney. I'm a physician at Homewood Health Center and Chief of Addiction and Trauma Services.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Mantanga and I work as the Director of Clinical Operations across our inpatient trauma and addiction services here at Homewood Health Center in Guelph. Today, Yelena and I are so excited to share with you news about changes to our Guardians program at Homewood Health Center. One of the only facilities of its kind in Canada, providing inpatient treatment to our first responders, military personnel, and veterans, and uniquely tailored to the mental health needs of these groups. We have some exciting changes to the way the program is delivered that we're going to tell you about today.
For the last 3 years, we've been running the Guardians program, focusing specifically on treating first responders, military members, and veterans with operational stress, or PTSD. And today we're announcing that we are actually expanding this program to be available to those communities and members of those communities who also have standalone depression, anxiety, or substance use without that operational stress or PTSD component. We're really excited to be able to offer treatment to more people in these communities because we know that getting treatment as part of a group of people who understand what you've been through in your life it really helps to make people well. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect when you come to treatment. So when you come to the Guardians program, you'll be with us for 9 weeks. You'll be in a setting on a specific unit with other members of the Guardians program. We do it this way so that you can have a sense of safety and belonging and be able to develop trust in your peers and your team to get the most out of your treatment.
We know that the therapists and the clinical staff here have much to offer you, but we also know about the power of peer connection and how important it is for the voices of other first responders and military personnel to inform your care and for you to inform theirs. There's so much for us to learn from each other.
You'll get most of your treatment in a group setting with your peers, as Carrie mentioned, but you will also get weekly individual therapy so that you can have the opportunity to dive into the issues that are important to you in a setting that feels very safe and where you can build that relationship with your therapist.
The therapeutic approaches that we use here in the Guardians program at Homewood are all evidence-based, and they really help folks to look at the beliefs they have about the things that have happened in their life, whether they're related to their work or whether they're other parts of their life, to look at those beliefs, to challenge them, to think about them more critically, and to make change that impacts not only how we think, but how we feel about ourselves, about our lives, about our jobs, and our place in the world. If you're someone who thinks you might benefit from an intensive, structured, evidence-based program focused on the unique needs of military personnel, first responders, and veterans, please reach out to our intake team to have a conversation.
Invisible Wounds will host events promoting mental wellness to first responders, their families, and civilians. To find out more, please visit our website at invisible-wounds.ca.